What if I told you that some of the most fascinating stories from WWF's Golden Era aren't about the legends everyone remembers, but about the names that quietly slipped through the cracks, the ones who showed up, had their moment, and then just disappeared? If you came here to uncover those forgotten faces and finally find out what really happened to them, you're in exactly the right place, because this is where those stories come back to life. When people look back at the golden era of WWF, the spotlight almost always lands on the giants of the industry, the larger-than-life figures, the icons who defined wrestling for an entire generation. But that era wasn't built by just a handful of megastars. It was filled with dozens of performers who stepped into the ring, played their roles, and contributed in ways that often go unnoticed today. Some had the look, but not the push. Some had the talent, but not the timing. And some just got lost in the shuffle of a rapidly expanding national product. Scott Casey is a perfect place to start. He's one of those wrestlers who feels like he should be remembered more than he is, yet somehow rarely comes up in conversations about that era. He had that classic Texas cowboy image, tough, grounded, and believable in a way that felt authentic. Before WWF, he had already put in the work, building a respectable career in places like Southwest Championship Wrestling, where he shared the ring with notable names and proved he could hold his own. But when he arrived in WWF in 1987, the landscape had already begun shifting. Wrestling was becoming brighter, louder, and more character-driven than ever before. And while Casey had the presence of an old-school babyface, that wasn't always enough anymore. He wasn't lacking ability, he wasn't lacking effort, he just didn't quite fit what the company was prioritizing at that exact moment. Even his appearance at Survivor Series 1988 tells that story. He wasn't originally planned for that spot, he was a replacement. And when he got in the match, he didn't have the kind of showcase that would elevate him. He was in, he did his part, and then he was out. That became a pattern, reliable, consistent, but never truly pushed beyond a certain level. After leaving WWF, he didn't stay in the spotlight much longer, eventually stepping away from the ring in the early 90s. But what makes his story meaningful is what came after. He helped train future stars, including names that would go on to shape wrestling in the years ahead. In a way, his biggest impact came not from what fans saw on television, but from what happened behind the scenes. Then there's Battle Cat, a character that almost feels like a time capsule of how experimental, and sometimes strange, the Golden Era could be. The man behind the mask, Brady Boone, was actually a very capable wrestler, quick, skilled, and technically sound. But that alone didn't guarantee anything in WWF at the time. When he first appeared, he was mostly used to make others look good. That role wasn't uncommon, but it often meant you had to find another way to stand out. So when he returned as Battle Cat, it was clearly an attempt to give him something more memorable. Bright colors, a mask, a more aggressive persona. It was designed to grab attention instantly. And it did, just not in the way that leads to long-term success. The look was eye-catching, but not exactly intimidating. The gimmick had energy, but it didn't have depth. It never evolved into something that audiences could really invest in. And before it had time to develop, it was already losing momentum. What makes it even more unusual is how quickly things shifted behind the scenes. Boone was gone, someone else took over the role, and suddenly the entire idea of Battle Cat felt even more disconnected. It became one of those odd footnotes in wrestling history, a character that existed just long enough to be remembered, but not long enough to matter in a bigger way. Black Bart, on the other hand, feels like the exact opposite kind of missed opportunity. If you looked at him, you'd think he was built for WWF. He had the size, the rugged look, and the presence of someone who could easily fit into that era's love for larger-than-life figures. But timing can be everything, and by the time he arrived, his career was already winding down. He wasn't new to wrestling, far from it. He had years of experience and had already achieved success in other territories. But in WWF, he never got the chance to show that side of himself. Instead, he was used more as a supporting player, someone who could step in, do the job, and help others shine. It's interesting because on paper, he had all the qualities the company usually favored, yet for whatever reason, he was never positioned as anything more than a background presence. He came in, did what was asked of him, and then quietly exited. No major storylines, no defining moments, just a brief chapter that could have been more. Al Perez is one of the more intriguing names on this list because he represents something different, a case where the potential was clearly there. He had the look, the confidence, and in-ring ability to be something bigger. In many ways, he felt like someone who should have had a long and successful run. Before WWF, he had already proven himself across multiple territories, holding titles and building a reputation as a well-rounded performer. When he arrived, it seemed like the next step in what could have been a major career trajectory, but things didn't unfold that way. Behind-the-scenes issues started to surface. Differences in vision, discomfort with changes to his character, and reported tensions all played a role. And in a company that was moving quickly and making constant adjustments, that kind of friction could be enough to stall momentum entirely. His time in WWF ended before it ever really took off, and that's what makes his story stand out. It wasn't about lack of talent, it wasn't about not fitting in physically. It was about circumstances that prevented him from ever reaching the level he seemed capable of. Pete Doherty brings a completely different kind of story into the mix. He wasn't built like a superstar. He didn't look like a future champion, but he had something that made him unforgettable in his own way. His appearance alone told a story. Messy hair, a rough look, and a presence that felt more real than polished. He became known for losing, not just occasionally, but consistently. And somehow, that became his identity. In an environment where most performers were trying to climb the ladder, he carved out a role at the very bottom and made it his own. What's fascinating is how that actually worked in his favor, at least in terms of memorability. Fans recognized him. They reacted to him, not because he was dominant, but because he was different. He felt like someone he might actually run into outside the arena, which made his matches feel oddly relatable. Big Bully Busick had a presence that felt grounded in something more realistic. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't over the top in the same way as some others. He came across like someone who could genuinely cause damage, and that gave him a certain edge. His gimmick leaned into that toughness, presenting him as a rough, no-nonsense figure. And for a brief moment, it seemed like that could work. He had a memorable look, a distinct personality, and even a few moments that hinted at something bigger. But just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. His departure before Survivor Series 1991 cut off what little momentum he had, and the character never had the chance to fully develop. It's one of those cases where timing and circumstance played a bigger role than anything else. Chris Walker represents the kind of wrestler who looked like he belonged in the spotlight. Physically impressive, with a presence that immediately caught attention, he seemed like someone who could fit right into the era's focus on power and spectacle. But having the look is only part of the equation. Opportunity matters, and so does execution. During his short time in WWF, he didn't get enough chances to truly establish himself. His appearances were limited, and the moments he did have didn't leave a strong enough impact. Sometimes that's all it takes. A few missed opportunities, a lack of consistent exposure, and suddenly a promising career path fades before it ever really begins. Siva Afi's story is tied closely to expectation. He was brought in to fill a very specific role, one that came with comparisons and pressure from the start. Being positioned as a successor to a well-known style or persona can be both an opportunity and a challenge. For Afi, it meant stepping into a space that was already defined by someone else. And while he had the ability to perform, he wasn't given the platform to fully establish his own identity. He remained in a supporting role for much of his run, which made it difficult to stand out in a lasting way. Mark Young's journey is another example of how connections don't always guarantee success. Coming from a wrestling family gave him a certain level of visibility, but it didn't translate into a major push. He had moments where he tried to stand out, adding personality in different ways, but it wasn't enough to change his position on the card. And then there's Super Ninja, a name that feels almost mythical in how briefly it existed. One appearance, one moment, and yet it left an impression. There's something fascinating about that kind of legacy, where a single match can become the defining memory of an entire run. It wasn't about dominance or long-term storytelling, it was about timing, presentation, and the uniqueness of the moment. Even though it was short-lived, it became something people still talk about, which says a lot about how unpredictable wrestling history can be. Looking back at all of these names, there's a common thread that connects them. None of them were untalented. None of them were out of place. They were simply part of a system where not everyone could rise to the top at the same time. And maybe that's what makes their stories so compelling. Because in a world built on larger-than-life legends, these are the reminders of everything happening just beneath the surface. The careers that almost broke through, the characters that almost clicked, and the moments that almost changed everything. They may be forgotten by many, but they were never truly insignificant.